What's up, everybody? John Hoover, AllSooners, along with Ryan Chapman and Randall Sweet. We're in the press box for episode 223 of the AllSooners Podcast. This, of course, is the AllSooners Postgame Podcast. Sooners took out West Virginia. BYU took out West Virginia last week. That's not incorrect.
If they took out West Virginia, it wouldn't be certified fresh.
No, that's right.
They just
that would
played
be old.
BYU.
Old and stale. They took out BYU today, 31-24 here at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. We had a great time. We were here for 3 days. We hiked through the mountains. We watched the sunset. Got romantic at one point, I think. Maybe not.
How can you not be romantic about hiking in college football?
That's right. It was a complete game by the Sooners today, except for the fact that it wasn't. Last week was a complete game. We thought they had turned a corner in terms of 4 quarters of good football. Brent Venable said the best 4 quarters they had last week at West Virginia. Well, this week, significantly less so. Had more trouble running the football, had more trouble stopping the run, had a couple of wild passes. The weather got a little weird here at Lavelle Edwards in Provo, outside the Wasatch Mountains. We'll talk to Randall about what the conditions were like, what the crowd was like, but first, let's get your thoughts on how the defense kind of held up there at the end. Got some turnovers, turned the game around, and turned it over to a freshman quarterback.
Yeah. It's we had so much discussion last week about Jackson Arnold. He didn't come in to kneel out that game against West Virginia. Oklahoma's trying to preserve a red shirt. Brent Middles had basically said, that's the plan if we can stick to it.
Irony of ironies.
Yeah, it wasn't a knock on wood situation. He didn't say it out loud, but basically I think the vibe that we got was, if it's just to kneel out the game, it'll be Davis Bevel. If a backup situation is needed, well, that opens the door to Jackson Arnold.
A disaster, he called it.
If
a disaster happens and we have to take a hard right turn, we'll do it. That happened today.
Yeah, they took a hard right turn in the south end zone as Dillon Gabriel, Oklahoma's offense, set up with 1st and 5 near the end of the first half. Had to settle for a field goal. That second down play, we think, is probably the culprit, where Dillon Gabriel was designed to run up the middle, bounced outside. Randall had a great view of it. A really physical play. Dillon Gabriel, basically, for lack of better words, one of those situations where you worry because the head looks like it bounces off the turf a little bit, and then we get word, and it didn't really filter out until the players came back onto the field. That's Jackson Arnold warming up. Number 8, the little one number 8. Large number 8, Jonah Lulu was there. Dillon Gabriel was not. And Chris Plank had reported that Dillon Gabriel wouldn't come out to play the second half. So it was true freshman Jackson Arnold thrown into a tied football game. BYU fans that were up for it. Brent Venables said that they gave him a little hope due to processing some. Basically, BYU ran, McKay Matires said they ran a different defense than anything they had run all year against Oklahoma. And the running game was cooking in a way for BYU offensively that it hadn't. But Jackson Arnold didn't turn the ball over. OU forced 3 turnovers, huge pick 6, huge strip sack. And Oklahoma gets this thing out of here with a win, unlike the last 2 road trips where they turned the ball over 6 times. Oklahoma, no turnovers, 3 turnovers forced, turned into 21 points. That was the difference.
BYU came out today, played with a ton of heart. They did not look like a 5-5 team that had just gotten their doors blown off 3 weeks in a row. They come out here today, and I thought they looked like the contender that I thought they might be, coming into the Big 12 when we heard about it a couple of years ago that they were going to join the conference. So Randall was down on the field. I want to get his thoughts on the atmosphere, the weather, and how friggin' hard BYU was hitting Oklahoma. I mean, I talked to 3 players about it, and they all said, yeah, those guys were really hitting us hard today.
Yeah, I mean, so, to start with the environment, the fans at Lavelle Edwards Stadium here were really into the game. I mean, this stadium was rocking. I did not expect it to be as loud as it was here. This was probably the loudest game I've been at all season. Bedlam would border that, I would say, but I think that this probably takes the cake. These students were riled up. They were heckling Boomer, the OU mascot. They were, in a respectful way, of course, being BYU, but still heckling him, throwing the horns up, things of that nature. It was a rowdy atmosphere, and I think that, we've seen that affect OU throughout the season. I think it did a little bit more today. The conditions, I think, affected both teams pretty evenly. BYU had a lot of players slipping on the field. OU had a lot of players slipping. BYU had some drops that really hurt them. And then, that, like I said, the weather really affecting that. And then, like you said, the BYU guys, they were bringing the wood. I mean, Jackson Arnold, looking back at the highlights, Jackson Arnold got nailed on one of his QB runs. Gavin Sawchuk was running really hard. He got hit hard a few times. Jaleel Farouk on his the catch that kind of sealed the win for OU. He got nailed at the end of that play. They even reviewed it for targeting. So BYU came to play. I think Hoover said it best. They played with a lot of pride. The fan base kind of backed that up, and I think that it was kind of the perfect storm to keep them in the game. I mean, they were talking trash. You could tell that this was not one that they were. Some 5-5 teams after getting blown out 3 weeks in a row might come in and kind of lay down, and that was not the case with BYU today. They were ready to play.
Yeah, BYU is like the 19th winningest program in college football history in the last 60 years. They've got a very proud program, a terrific program, a great heritage. So that was not surprising to see them come out today for Coach Kalani Sitake and say, we're going to knock the hell out of these guys and do our best to try to win the game. I was impressed by what I saw out of BYU, the effort, the intensity, the focus. I was also impressed by the story of the game, which we've alluded to several times. Jackson Arnold coming off the bench, throwing some third and long passes, 2 times in the fourth quarter, one of them to set up a scoring opportunity, field goal, yanked it wide left. Another one was to clinch the game. You get the first down, you get to kneel. Ryan, we saw this happen at Kansas, where Oklahoma had an opportunity to get a first down and win the game. They ended up punting the ball. They ran the ball 3 times up the middle, basically. Punted the ball back to KU. KU goes down and cuts through the Oklahoma defense like a hot knife through butter. Scores the touchdown. Wins the game. That didn't happen today because Jeff Lebby had a different mindset. Jackson Arnold made a change to the play that Jeff Lebby called, and Brent Venables was okay with all of it.
Yeah. Brent Venables after the game said everyone's learned a little bit through adversity, and Jeff Lebby maintained they want to stay aggressive. Regardless of whether Jackson Arnold or Dillon Gabriel was going to be in the game, he said that in his mind he was thinking, as he knew going into halftime, Jeff Lebby, that is, that you're going to have to make a quarterback change. Stay aggressive. It'll open up some different QB run game, but stay aggressive, and that's what he did. 3rd and 13, as Hoover alluded to, that was the first one, the first big moment for Jackson Arnold, I thought, to kind of show under pressure, Oklahoma's marching close to the red zone, and the pocket, it was clean, but it got mucked up, not because of the pressure or anything. Jacob Sexton beat his man and in turn, and was kind of in the process of pancaking him almost, and that meant that there were some uneven footing near Jackson Arnold's legs, and he just coolly slid to the left, delivered a dart, a 16-yard completion to Jaleel Farouk on a 3rd and 13. That was the first one. Smith was the field goal, but get that ball rolling down the field. Then the huge one, Oklahoma got the ball back. McKay Matauer was talking about it's what every offense prides itself on, the 4-minute drill. Can you close out a game? Got into 3rd and 8. Jeff Lebby said all week long with all the quarterbacks, he was talking about, hey, if we get this look, if we get this zero coverage look, that it's going to be pressure. You want to check into this play. Jackson Arnold, the true freshman, preparing like he was going to play all week long, despite the fact that in the back of his mind he knew if Dillon Gabriel was healthy, he was probably going to redshirt. Able to make the check into slants, fires one in there to Jaleel Farouk. Hope it doesn't get lost all this. Made a great catch. Brent Venables pointed out afterward that he got absolutely smoked and held onto the football, was reviewed, like you mentioned, confirmed it's a catch. And that ended up being all she wrote, is after that, Oklahoma was able to kneel the ball out 3 times. So you had not just the non-running situation like you had at Kansas, where they basically ran the ball 3 times trying to get Kansas to use all their timeouts. It also wasn't the 4th and 5 situation in Bedlam. Jackson Arnold was able to have a couple of different plays where he's throwing the ball downfield, throwing the ball past the 6. Neither of them were 4th down, but able to connect, able to convert. Only completed, 5 passes? Jackson Arnold, I think he was a 5 of 9, but 2 of them were massive, high-pressure throws late here in Provo.
What a mature play for a freshman quarterback, true freshman quarterback, to come out of redshirt in the fourth quarter. He didn't start great. I think he was 2 for 5 passing in the fourth quarter with those 2 completions. But just confidence in his timing, confidence in his training, confidence in his receiver, confidence in the offensive line and the play call, and the ability to change the play call. Jaden Gibson said, that's how I knew. That's one of the things that makes me believe he's going to be a great quarterback. Drake Stoops said he was so proud of him. Jeff Lebby said the preparation that he's put in every day to stay engaged. I think Oklahoma, probably getting ahead of myself. I think Oklahoma's got a really special quarterback in Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, I mean, while there weren't many plays today that just catch your eye and you're like, that's a highlight play, that's going on his highlight reel. It was a very mature game. Like you said, stepping into a game that was really close, on the road. It was cold outside. It was raining a little bit. Jackson Arnold took those hits. He ran physically, which, is something that I think that obviously Jeff Lebby and company like to use him in that style. We saw that even whenever he was not coming in to relieve Dillon Gabriel. But the throws he did make, like you said, those 2 high-pressure third down throws, missed a little bit to Nick Anderson, but he showed off that arm strength. I mean, when he did miss that shot, I was thinking, well, hey, Dillon Gabriel, we kind of picked on him for underthrowing every deep ball. Jackson Arnold overthrew Nick Anderson by a good 5-10 yards. So showing off the arm strength, I think that while, again, it wasn't the big highlight reel performance, you definitely saw some of the maturity that is not typical from a freshman.
Well, you mentioned the slow start. I think this has kind of been lost in the shuffle as well. Oklahoma's coming out of the half. BYU got the ball back right immediately. So Jackson Arnold's then going to have to, he warmed up and then he's sitting on the sideline. I was just glued to him. I couldn't tell you what happened on his first defensive possession because we were all looking. He was on the phone with Jeff Lebby. Drake Stoops came over and dapped him up. McKay Matire come over. Jalil Farouk. I'm sure there were many, many others. But Oklahoma, because of a really nice punt by BYU, Jackson Arnold's first possession, he took over at his own 9-yard line. So he was battling field position. Yep. On third down, he actually escaped out of there, had a 20-plus yard run that was called back for an illegal block in the back. The second drive he took over, Oklahoma was at their own 20. So Oklahoma was losing the field position battle early on in the third quarter. And I think more than anything, I don't think it was necessarily Jeff Lebby didn't trust his true freshman quarterback to kind of air it out early. I think it was knowing, hey, the field position battles really, you're dug in. Oklahoma, the biggest thing was not to turn the ball over themselves. That almost, for me, meant that he wasn't going to get into this huge rhythm early because Oklahoma was having to climb up the field position battle in the third quarter.
And you mentioned not turning the ball over. Jackson Arnold almost did fumble a snap, was able to corral it, and I don't know that he got positive yards on the play, but didn't lose the ball. I think very important.
Yeah, especially after 3 turnovers each of the last 2 defeats. To go on the road again and not turn the football over in, again, poor weather conditions, hostile crowd, loud guys were still false starting. That's still a problem that has to get cleaned up.
Yeah.
That was the story of the game. Jackson Arnold coming in off the bench to fill in for Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel getting hurt, probably upper body, probably head, possibly concussion. We'll see. Brent Venables did express a little bit of positivity, or at least, optimism, to say that he thinks it's realistic he can come back next year. And then he admitted, I haven't talked to anybody. What did I say, next year? Not next year, no.
Next week.
We've been down that road. Next week. But he also said, he admitted that I haven't talked to anybody about it since halftime. So he's a little bit in the dark, and as of the press conference.
Yeah. We'll have, with the shorter week, right, Oklahoma plays on Friday. The Brent Venables press conference will be on Monday.
Yep.
So we'll have that official update on Monday. Brent Venables, again, he immediately was pretty optimistic, like you said, didn't think it was going to be a long-term or whatever. But then he was asked, but for Friday, and he's like, we'll have to see. I just keep going back to, if it does end up being a concussion, I don't know if Oklahoma will ever confirm that or not.
Right.
A year ago, we were in this spot, right? Dillon Gabriel, in mid-second quarter, instead of the end of the second quarter, goes down in Fort Worth. Concussion protocol, he didn't clear out of it by a Saturday game against Texas. It'll be interesting, one less day. If it is a concussion protocol, that could be massive, if it's one less day. But
Braden Willis isn't there to pull their fat out of the fire this time.
Yeah. Well, I think that they're pretty confident of what we saw behind us with Jackson Arnold, what he can do, especially with the whole week preparation. So that'll be something to clock. Otherwise, I didn't see really anybody else leave with an injury. Just saw McCullough came back today. Gentry Williams dressed and went through warm-ups, didn't play. And Danny Stutzman played, though he was battling through food poisoning. He told us afterward that he thinks it's pretty much through him by now. But that was kind of the intrigue as far as what that goes, because otherwise it was kind of straightforward outside of Gabriel, a huge one on the injury front today.
Tyler Guyton also dressed and warmed up, but didn't play. Just to note.
Sexton went the distance at right tackle.
He was good.
So that was the the story of the game. The play of the game, guys, was a 100-yard pick six by Billy Bowman. 100-yard pick six. It was 17-17. BYU was driving. They were at the goal line. They were throwing into the end zone, and here comes Billy Bowman to save the day and goes 100 yards the other way. That was the play of the game. And you know what? If this thing turns, think about this. If they go on and they get Texas, for instance, tonight to lose at Iowa State, I think they kick off. Have they already kicked off?
Kicked off 35 minutes ago
Yeah,
for
they
us.
kicked off at 7 o'clock.
So you'll know before we do here on this Postgame
here on the
pod.
podcast. But if Texas were to lose tonight, Oklahoma comes out, wins next week against TCU at home. There's a chance they go to the Big 12 championship game. They've got a clear path if Texas loses tonight, right? All you got to do is win. That could have been a season-saving, a championship-saving kind of play by Billy Bowman.
Yeah, and it came on the heels of in the third quarter, BYU was averaging 9.4 yards per carry. In the first half, it was the RPO game. It looked a lot like Bedlam,
Yep.
where and a little bit like Kansas, where when they would pull the ball and it was almost a modern
Move the
triple
quarterback
option look.
out, and then throw it. Yep.
Yeah. Oklahoma didn't really do a good job containing that. That was the first half. In the second half, BYU was just running downhill. They were averaging 9.4 yards per carry, and it was 23-yard run, 11-yard run, 20-yard run. That set BYU up at the 2-yard line. No goal line stand, but little quick out. Billy Bowman sees it. He checked into the right thing before the play.
He was supposed to blitz. He wasn't supposed to blitz.
Yeah, there's an option for him to blitz if there were 3 guys out there. He was not supposed to take that option. He didn't. Instead, he blitzed the football is what he did. He broke on that thing, and it was a legitimate foot race to outrun Jake Retzlaff, the backup quarterback. He's got some wheels on him, as well as Brent Venables and Billy Bowman said after the game. But 100 yards all the way down, that would have been huge. BYU never led in this game. That was their chance to really take the lead. And we mentioned the crowd who, Randall, you could have felt this more than we did, but it was sold out. Not every seat was filled, and you could tell it was kind of a muted atmosphere, or at least it felt like a muted atmosphere to me. To start, but once BYU was hanging around, still in the second quarter,
They're charged up.
it rumbled. It felt like the doors were about to fly off the press box because it was building. You could feel the BYU fans finally believing, got a chance to win this football game, not just hang around, and Billy Bowman snatched it. A stunned silence right after. BYU went down, tied the game up, got the crowd back in it, but a huge play.
17-17, Billy Bowman with the run back. That was one of 3 turnovers Oklahoma got, takeaways, turned those into 21 points. So it was 24-17, and from there, like Ryan said, I mean, there was a momentum push in the game. It went from being super loud to we're going to beat them to all of a sudden not a peep out of that crowd. It was incredible.
I mean, we were talking at halftime, the video guys down in the field, we were saying, man, this feels an awful lot like Kansas.
Yep.
And coming out of the half, I was thinking, man, if BYU is able to score first coming out of the half and take that momentum, that could be really, really, I mean, that could hurt OU a lot, especially, which we didn't know at the time, especially with a backup quarterback in the game. And so Billy Bowman being able to take that momentum right out from under BYU, like you said, the crowd was silent afterwards. I mean, I turned around right after and I saw plenty of, what's the phrase, surrender cobra,
Yes.
immediately after that play. And so you could definitely tell that took, briefly took the air out of the stadium. Again, as you mentioned, BYU scored, but after that, that I feel like really was a momentum changing play.
Rondell Bothroyd got a fumble at the end of the first quarter, I believe, turned it into a touchdown. Sooners turned it into a touchdown on offense early in the second quarter. And then the early in the fourth quarter, Danny Stutzman sacks Retzlaff, the quarterback, and who recovered? Jacob Lacey recovered. And the Sooners turned that into a touchdown as well when Gavin Sawchuk has the Tawee Walker-like run. Runs over a guy, runs around a guy, spins out, pulls away from a guy who's trying to tackle him. It's a fantastic run. I actually said, I thought you were Tawee there for a minute. I had to look and say, oh, that's 27. That's Gavin Sawchuk. He got a kick out of that.
Yeah, big physical run, and like we've talked about this past week, he looked closest for me, Sawchuk did, to the Florida State Sawchuk that we saw against West Virginia. Today there were moments of that where he's bursting through the line. It wasn't like he was ripped off a 60-yarder, but he had some explosive run plays. That one was just a grown-up, put your big boy pants on, physical run, And we said as soon as it happened, we were like, that was the Tommy Walker ready. Stiff arming a guy. And it was a hard-hitting game. And Sawchuk, he's not just flash. He's got that grit to him, and he's really come on strong. Not a career-high rushing yards today for Sawchuk. He ended up with 107, though.
Only 107.
Only 107. That's his third straight game crossing the century mark. And Sawchuk was huge because it let Jeff Levy, when they were playing the field position game in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter when Oklahoma was playing with that lead, just trying to keep BYU at that arm's length, it let Jeff Levy lean on that offensive line and on Sawchuk and not make a true freshman go out there and say anything crazy like, hey, you need to throw 20 balls in the second half on the road in your first meaningful snaps or anything.
Yeah, and they were running the ball effectively in the first half as well. Mostly, occasionally, they would get some nice runs. He had a 29-yard run, so that makes 4 straight weeks he's had at least a 29-yard run. That's pretty good. They were moving the football, though, and what that did was open up the passing game. Dillon Gabriel throwing the football, 13 of 21, as I mentioned, 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was really good, and it looked like he was getting ready to have one of those 400-yard, 5-touchdown type of games.
Yeah, I mean, found Drake Stoops a few times in the first half. Jaden Gibson had a huge first half, 2 catches, 80-plus yards, and a touchdown.
Career high for him, too.
Almost 2 touchdowns. I mean, Gabriel hit him on that deep shot and then found him streaking across the back of the end zone wide open. He was able to get a foot down. Obviously, aside from a few errant throws, a few drops, again, the weather was questionable. DG looked great out there. If OU is without him for TCU, it'll be interesting to see how Jackson Arnold looks under a week of preparation. But I thought, like you said, in the first half, Dillon Gabriel was lighting that BYU secondary up, even if they only put 17 points on the scoreboard.
Aiden Robbins was a problem for the Oklahoma defense. He's the running back that had 182 yards today, averaged 8.3 yards per carry. So guess what? They're going into the season finale next week. Oklahoma's got some things to work on.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, here's the good news. Oklahoma doesn't have to figure out how to play on the road next week. They can't do that. But I do. When Oklahoma and Texas leave, this is going to be the biggest stadium in the Big 12. I don't know if people realize that. I've always seen the setting when you watch BYU games on TV, but I guess I just never paid attention to a ton of the crowd shots. This is going to be the biggest stadium in the Big 12. So it's a good atmosphere, hard to play in, but that shouldn't have affected the Oklahoma defense, which in the first half, like we mentioned, the RPOs, all that stuff. In the second half, Robbins just got going downhill, and it opened everything up. I know that he's been playing through some injuries, but it looked like Oklahoma's defense sprung a leak at one point, because the first 2 drives of the second half, they came out, and it looked like Brent Venables' halftime adjustment. Ted Roof, the adjustment was blitz Retzlaff, get in his face. It worked, and you thought, okay, they've made the halftime adjustments. They've really figured this thing out. And then BYU just went to straight up gashing Oklahoma in the run game. It was really, really great. It got the crowd going. They appreciated that. They could see what was happening, and it became a situation where Oklahoma had to force those turnovers because, frankly, that was their most effective way of getting stops most of this game.
Yeah. Randall, what did you think about we talked about the contact, the physicality, Ice Drake Stoops, and he said he actually flinched and grabbed his arm a little bit, and he's like, yeah, they were really hitting hard, like he left a bruise on him. What was your thoughts about that? We talked about the pride that BYU plays with, but just finishing that game strong.
Yeah, I mean, they were laying the wood. I mean, OU, I think both sides of the field were laying the wood.
That's what he said too. Drake told me, he said, I think Oklahoma was hitting pretty hard too.
Yeah, I mean,
good call, Drake.
Go look at some of the Danny Stutzman highlights that we have on AllSooners.com. He, as usual, was not afraid to go downhill and hit people. Kobe McKenzie was laying some big hits today. And again, you mentioned BYU. I mean, Jackson Arnold got rocked on a few of his QB runs. Actually, he ran pretty physically and still got hit pretty hard. And I think that the BYU secondary wasn't necessarily great in the pass game, but they were not afraid to come downhill to lay a hit on a running back, on a receiver, a quarterback, and I think that OU, to their credit, they did a great job of playing through that. Like we mentioned, they didn't cough the ball up, they didn't flinch, they didn't shy away from contact. They gave it right back to BYU on both sides. I thought the Oklahoma offensive line really, really physical. I thought they did some good things, but again, it was a dogfight. BYU was not going out easy, and they made it a very physical game.
Yep. So Oklahoma ended a losing streak today. I don't know if you guys knew that. They were 0-2 against BYU. The 94 Copper Bowl in Tucson, Arizona, they lost 31-6. They were down 31-0. Had some funky quarterback situation going on with that. Garrick McGee got meningitis. This was 1994. And Terrence, what was his name? I don't even remember the quarterback's name. Terrence Brown was the starting quarterback. He ended up like 13 for 30 in the game. They couldn't score. Then, of course, we all remember the 2009 game. I wrote about that earlier this week, talked to Colby Clausen, the guy who hit Sam Bradford and knocked him out for basically the season. Came back for a game and a half and ended up leaving the season against Texas later in the season. But against BYU in the opener at Jerry World 2009, 13 points on the board, 6 points on the board in the Copper Bowl in 1994. Today, same thing happened. They get the backup quarterback. They knock out the starter. Dillon Gabriel goes out. Jackson Arnold, no problem. I'll go out there and put up 31 points. 24 with the pick six, I guess. But no, apparently that was like, I had the note of the day on Twitter. I put that on Twitter and Toby Rowland was talking about it. It's
Right.
a great note. Third time they've played, third time they've lost their starting quarterback. Crazy stuff, too.
Yeah, this true freshman cut a little bit different than the other true freshmen that came in.
Terrence Brown and Landry Jones.
Yeah, and that's a lot to say, right? I mean, Landry Jones has his defenders for purely being a stats guy. I don't think that anyone that watches football is going to tell you that Landry Jones is like a great, like the greatest Oklahoma quarterback. He just was the one that started for 4 years. But Jackson Arnold came in, road environment, all that stuff. I thought he handled it really well. He said he was a little anxious. He told us after the Arkansas State game that he's a guy that traditionally gets very nervous before football games. He's like, it helped to be up 49-0. It's the best situation he's ever been in. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something that can calm him down. He's got some reps under him. If he is called into action on Friday against TCU, it's going to be an interesting week to track just because Oklahoma will have everything to play for. Like if this BYU team shows up in Stillwater, I don't think they'll win the game, but it'll be a situation like this where it'll come down and be late, and BYU will have chances to make plays. That's a big if. This BYU team's been a lot different at home than on the road.
That's true.
And if Iowa State doesn't get it done, then Texas still has a chance to lose to Texas Tech as well. You'll know the Iowa State result, like I said, by the time you listen to this. But a ton to play for, a ton of pressure on either Gabriel or Arnold in that Black Friday game.
If I said this during the Oklahoma State game as we were wrapping up the post-game stuff here, I said if Oklahoma State plays like this, like they did against Houston tonight, and if BYU plays like this, like they did against Oklahoma today, BYU will win the football game. Simple as that. Now, they are playing in Stillwater as opposed to Provo. They were 4-1 at home this season. So they clearly play better at home than they do on the road. Randall, what's your gut tell you? And I'll get yours here in a second. What's your gut tell you about who the quarterback is next week?
I think that we see Jackson Arnold again. I mean, if it is a concussion for Dillon Gabriel, then I feel like on a short week, especially where he gets 5 days to rest, that it would be maybe irresponsible to rush him back, especially because of a head injury. You don't want to risk things like that. I don't think that I don't know the rules for concussion protocol in college like in the NFL, but I would assume that if it is truly a concussion, that Dillon Gabriel will miss at least one game. We saw Dillon Gabriel miss time with a concussion last season, I think a game and a half. So that would be the same this season, a game and a half if he does miss TCU. But I would say we get Jackson Arnold next week on Black Friday.
Okay, Ryan, let's get your gut take on that as well. Is Zach Schmidt going to be the kicker next week? You missed a 28-yarder today. I didn't know you could miss a 20 from the right hash. He missed it to the left
and kicked the ball out of bounds.
Yeah,
and kicked a kickoff out of bounds. Take him at the 40. They got to get that figured out.
There is no figuring it out. Like
one more game. Can you hang on one more game?
Yeah. Well,
plus possibly a championship game plus a bowl game.
Yeah. That they have to go to the transfer portal for a kicker. They
They
simply do.
My question is, there's 4 or 5 kickers on the roster. Are they just that bad that they can't get on the field with Zach Schmidt?
He wins the game in practice, or he wins the job in practice. That's what we're told.
I mean,
must be.
And I think though at some point you have to see practice is not the game. I mean, it's not like it's not obvious to everybody, right? I mean,
that was a super important kick too. In his fourth quarter, had to break a tie.
Yep.
And again, right hash, and you miss it to the left from 28 yards. That's almost impossible to do.
I mean, is Gavin Marshall, is Reddy Mustafaraj? I mean, are those guys not at least just throw him in there to try. I mean, I would assume that Gavin Marshall and Reedy, I apologize for mispronouncing his name, could hit a 28-yarder. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I know Zach Schmidt's good on extra points, but I don't know. It's baffling to me that there's not a kicker on this roster that can at least make regular field goals.
Well, or the punter. They had come in and do it.
They had special teams issues again, though. They set up a great fake punt where Elzinga had a beautiful throw.
I got a great shot of it, too.
Yeah, hit up the highlights, AllSooners.com. Elzinga, a great throw. Ethan Downs, really composed moment. But Nick Anderson was blocking downfield again. That's OPI. It's about as easy as it comes. Yep. It absolutely was an offensive pass interference.
Yep, totally.
For all the talk about Jay Nunez last year, I think they've been bad, like a huge net negative on special teams this year. They've got to figure that out, and so that'll be huge, especially if results go Oklahoma's way. Like if you're asking for my gut, here's my gut. Jackson Arnold starts against TCU, and then Dillon Gabriel starts the Bedlam rematch in Arlington.
Wow, Bedlam rematch in Arlington. Okay, so you've made it known you think they're going to qualify for the championship.
I would,
and if they qualify for the championship, I think I know how you feel if they play Oklahoma State. It's a Bedlam game; they're going to win. That's the way you always phrase it.
Yeah, I mean, if they just
this year, but
if they just here, I'll catch it. If they turn the ball over 3 times again, they probably are going to lose again. If they don't, Ollie Gordon's really banged up, guys. This is what Mike Gundy has seen this. Not to turn this into an OSU thing. Mike Gundy doesn't like to ride one guy, I think because he's had a bunch of guys, like Chuba Hubbard was banged up in a Bedlam game at the end of the year. You had, oh my gosh, he's at Pittsburgh right now doing a great job. Jalen Warren, he was banged up in a Bedlam game at the end of the year because they put so much on him. Ollie Gordon was great against Houston, but limping around again. I like their chances in that rematch if everyone's healthy. No Danny Stutzman in Stillwater. Right. That would have been, obviously, we saw today, Joe Masato, this is what you get when you get great work by the Oklahoma and elevated him to comments. He was Johnny on the spot. You know, the Jordan flu game happened in Utah, which was also food poisoning.
He's an NBA guy. Come on.
Yeah. Danny Stutzman, food poisoning, 10 tackles, awesome. The strip sack. Huge. He means everything to this defense, even when they're not able to, when they're trying to adjust on the fly.
Yeah. It's tough. We're sitting here applauding Jackson Arnold. The fact of the matter is he's a true freshman. Dillon Gabriel ranks first in the Big 12 in points responsible for per game, total offense, passing efficiency rating, passing touchdowns, passing yards per attempt, and completion percentage. He leads the Big 12 in all those categories and ranks in the top 10 nationally in all those categories. So missing him, replacing him is going to be very difficult. I don't care who your quarterback is, because nobody really, frankly, there's a lot of quarterbacks in the country right now that are playing football. Almost none of them are playing at Dillon Gabriel's level. So to have a freshman come in and say, yeah, sure, I can win this game and we can go to the Big 12 championship, that's a lot to ask of Jackson Arnold. Not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying don't expect him to be Dillon Gabriel next week.
And it'd be interesting to see if he does start. It'll be interesting to see if there's a little bit of an altered game plan, maybe a more run-heavy offense, especially because it feels like the past 4 weeks, so he's gotten that run game going. We mentioned Gavin Sawchuk, 3 straight 100-yard games. Before that, Tolly Walker went for, I think, 140. So if he does start, I feel like we would probably see a heavy dose of Gavin Sawchuk, a heavy dose of Tolly Walker, a heavy dose of Jackson Arnold in the run game. But I do think that they would still let him throw the ball against a TCU team that, while they are, I think, 5-6 on the season, they did take Texas down to the wire. If OU is caught sleeping in that game, it could be a game that goes south for them. But again, they play a lot better at home, and I think that with a full week of preparation, Jackson Arnold would be able to do enough to get them through that game.
TCU coming to Norman next week. What time?
11 a.m.
11 a.m. Morning kickoff, rooster kick. One more. No, sorry. If they win that one and they get to the championship game, it'll be two more morning kickoffs. So 11 a.m. Black Friday. What do you got?
So as I stepped out in between one of the drives to hit the facilities, and even the BYU broadcast, which was going on in the bathroom, the guy was like, this is it's the first time we've played at 10 a.m. in Provo in over 20 years. And Oklahoma, they're mighty used to those morning kicks. It feels like they play at 11 a.m. every single week, so that shouldn't be a real big to-do for them. And I was like, even the BYU broadcast was like, yeah, Oklahoma, they just play at 11. That's just what they do.
Yeah, 11 o'clock kickoffs are not the best for fans, for recruits. Any recruiting news to touch on now that I've thrown that out there? Anybody that you know for sure? I mean, you can say generally, yeah, it's going to be a big recruiting weekend. No, everybody's busy on Black Friday.
I would assume that it's going to be a lot less of a recruiting weekend than we normally see, especially for home games, considering it's a Black Friday game. That's going to deter a lot of people. It's an 11 a.m. kick. And a lot of the local recruits, so, it feels like every game, all the Carl Albert guys are there, all the local guys are there. Well, this weekend, a lot of those guys, next weekend I should say, a lot of those guys are going to be playing in the Oklahoma High School State semifinals. I don't think you'll see any of the Carl Albert guys there because they play later that night. Caden Jones, who's another 2026 OU target, he's at, I feel like, every home game. I don't think that I would not expect to see him there because, again, he's playing later that day. But maybe some of the local kids like the Josh Isosas, the Bergen Kaisers, Michael Patterson, McDonald, some of those guys who are no longer playing, maybe a few kids from DFW in Texas. But I would expect that it's considering the high school playoffs are on the same day and it's Black Friday, I would expect it'll be probably a light recruiting weekend for the Sooners.
One more quick note on Dillon Gabriel. He's still 10th in NCAA career passing yards. He moved up to 8th. He passed Ty Detmer on the career all-time NCAA touchdown passing chart. He now has 122 touchdown passes. Ty Detmer has 121.
Ironic.
Here at BYU, he passed Ty Detmer. I think I made that declaration that if he does something in the next 5 games, he could pass him and pass Ty Detmer in Provo, which would be ironic, and it was ironic.
Yeah.
Up next for him, if he does play and throws one more touchdown pass, he'll tie Landry Jones for 123 touchdown passes. That is good for 8th all time. So right now he's sitting 9th. That's kind of cool. 11 a.m. TCU Black Friday. What else we got?
I just hope that here in the near future, it won't be in the near future because of how scheduling works, but this has been one of my favorite trips I think we've taken in the 3 years that I've worked with you, Hoove. And if any Oklahoma fans didn't get the chance to make it out, and if Oklahoma gets BYU on the schedule at some point later on, I know a lot of big ifs, make an effort to come out here. I mean, it is
magical.
It is an unreal, very unique setting for college football, something that you're not going to get in the SEC, right, as far as the mountains that surround it, all that stuff. It's a ton of fun. I'm very much looking forward to trips to Death Valley and Tuscaloosa and going between the hedges. But this has been a pretty cool trip, and I'm very, very glad that of the newbies, Oklahoma got to swing through Cincinnati and BYU on the way out the door.
Yeah, the season's not over, but it was a fun season. I guess we have one more game at home Friday. It's going to be weird. We got a compacted week with the game on Friday, and then we got to take a day of Thanksgiving right in the middle. And then Brent Venables is speaking on Monday this week, as Ryan mentioned. So it's going to be a weird week in Norman, Oklahoma, covering this team one more time this week. We'll see if things shake out. We're going to go find a place, probably the hotel room, right? Probably find a place to watch the Texas and Iowa State game. Who knows what's going to happen, but it's been fun. Shoot, episode 221 223 is in the books, I guess.
Yeah, it's in the books, and no happenings of 212 today, Hoove. So you got that in Salt Lake City.
I got Salt Lake City. I checked into my hotel room. It was room 212, so I changed my pick to say Oklahoma's going to cover the spread, 24-point spread, because I checked into room 212. It didn't happen. They did not cover 24. Breaking news.
I feel I don't really ever take victory laps, but AllSooners.com, under the radar, I picked Jaden Gibson.
Huge. It was huge. Also, head to AllSooners.com. New redesign, new site look.
That's right.
It'll look a little bit different than maybe what you're used to. We've still got our big, nice featured story. The most recent stories are just to the right of that. So if you go up there and you're like, hey, where are all the videos? Just scroll down just a little bit. There's a new OU football tab. Click that. All the post-game videos. We talked to a ton of guys after this game. Brent Venables, Ted Roof, Jeff Levy. All that content. And then we'll do it all again on Monday, like we said.
Yep. It's split up into sections, so it's easier for you to find what you're looking for. If you want football, if you want recruiting, if you want softball, whatever it is. It's easier to find instead of just scrolling down, or jumping on the one tab that you see at the top of the page. You'll like it. I hope you guys like it. Let us know in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube, or hit us up on Twitter. _ Ryan Chapman, Randall Sweet 5, John E. Hoover. Let us know. We want to hear from you guys about what you think about the redesigned website. That's it, fellas. 2:23 in the books. For Randall, for Ryan, I'm Hoover. We'll see you guys.